My name is Nevia Brooks, and I am 73 years old. The day my family finally looked up to me was the same day they realized I was no longer beneath them. It happened in the living room. All of them were there. My children, my sister, even cousins who hadn't called me in years. They stood around quietly while I sat in my old chair by the window. No one spoke at first. No one laughed. No one dismissed me. That silence was new. But before I tell you how that moment happened, let me ask you something. If you love emotional stories about strength, truth, and quiet comebacks, subscribe to this channel, like this video, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss what comes next. And tell me in the comments, what country are you watching from? I want to know who is sitting with me right now. Because the way my family treated me for years. You wouldn't believe it. And what happened next changed everything. For most of my life, my family saw me as small. Not because I was weak, but because I was quiet. I was the one who showed up early and left late. The one who cooked, cleaned, and smiled. The one who never argued, even when my heart hurt. They called me simple. They said I didn't think big. They said I was just managing. I let them believe that. At family gatherings, I sat in the corner. They talked over me. They laughed at my ideas. They made decisions without asking my opinion. "Don't worry, Auntie," my nephew once said, patting my shoulder. "This is grown-up talk." I was 65 that day. I smiled anyway. When my husband passed, things got worse. My sister moved into the house to help. My children took over to protect me. Everyone had advice. No one had respect. "Just let us handle it," they'd say. "You don't need stress at your age. You wouldn't understand these things." Slowly, my voice disappeared. The night everything changed started like any other family meeting. They called me into the living room and told me to sit down. "We need to talk," my eldest son said, standing tall like he was in charge. I remember looking up at all of them and thinking, when did I become the child in this room? "We're worried about you," my sister said, folding her arms. "You're falling behind," another added. "We don't think you should be making decisions anymore," my daughter said softly. I listened. I always listened. Then my son said the words that broke something open inside me. "Let's be honest," he said. "You've never been anything special." The room went quiet. My chest tightened. But I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just looked at him and asked calmly, "Is that what you really think?" He shrugged. "We all do." That was the moment. The exact moment. Because while they looked down at me, something inside me stood up. Not anger. Clarity. I nodded slowly. "All right," I said. "If that's how you see me, then let me show you something." They laughed. Not loudly. Confidently. Because they thought they already knew everything about me. They were wrong. I reached for my bag and pulled out a small folder. Not thick. Not dramatic. Just quiet. "What's that?" my sister asked. "My life," I replied. They rolled their eyes. Until I opened it. Inside were papers they had never seen. Records. Receipts. Proof of things I had built quietly while they were busy underestimating me. The laughter stopped. My son leaned forward. "What is this?" he asked. I looked up at him. "This," I said, "is the part of me you never bothered to look at." No one spoke. Not yet. Because the truth hadn't finished walking into the room. And what they were about to discover next would force them to look up at me for the first time in their lives. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The room stayed quiet after I opened the folder. Not the awkward kind of quiet. The kind where people are suddenly afraid to speak because words might expose them. My son was the first to move. He leaned closer, his confident posture slipping just a little. "What are those papers?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. For years, I had rushed to explain myself, to soften things, to make sure everyone felt comfortable, even when I didn't. Not anymore. I flipped the first page slowly and laid it flat on the table. "They're records," I said, "of work I've done, of money I saved, of things I built." My sister scoffed. "Built what?" she asked. "You were just managing." I looked at her calmly. "Yes," I said, "managing is building." I pointed to a line on the paper. "Do you see this?" I asked. My nephew squinted. "That's a property address," he said. "Yes," I replied, "one I bought 20 years ago." The room shifted. My daughter frowned. "You never told us about that," she said. I nodded. "You never asked." They exchanged glances. The kind people share when they realize a story they believed might be incomplete. "That doesn't mean much," my sister said quickly. "Anyone can own one small thing." I smiled faintly. "Turn the page," I said. The second page was thicker. More numbers. More dates. My son's face tightened as he scanned it. "What is this?" he asked, louder now. "A business account," I replied, "opened in my name." His eyes shot up. "That can't be right," he said. "It is," I replied. "I've been adding to it quietly for years." My daughter sat down slowly. "You always said money stressed you," she said. I nodded. "It did," I replied. "That's why I learned to be careful." They stared at me like they were seeing a stranger. Which made sense. They had never really seen me at all. My sister crossed her arms. "So what are you saying?" she asked. "That you're richer than us?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "I'm saying you underestimated me." The room buzzed with confusion now. Questions overlapped. "How long?" "Why didn't you tell us?" "Who helped you?" I raised my hand gently. "One at a time," I said. They stopped. That surprised them. "I didn't tell you," I continued, "because every time I tried to speak, you told me I wouldn't understand." I looked at my son. "Do you remember saying that?" He swallowed. "I was just trying to help," he muttered. "Help doesn't erase," I replied. I turned to my daughter. "Do you remember telling me to sit and listen?" I asked. Her eyes filled. "I didn't mean it like that," she said. "But you did it," I replied softly. I wasn't angry. That confused them more than shouting ever could. I was simply honest. "You all looked down on me," I said calmly. Not because I was small, but because I was quiet. No one argued. Because they knew it was true. My nephew cleared his throat. "So what does this mean?" he asked. I folded the folder and placed it back in my bag. "It means," I said, "that you don't know me as well as you thought." The meeting ended quickly after that. Too quickly. They mumbled excuses. Said they'd talk later. They left in small groups, avoiding my eyes. Only my daughter lingered. "Mom," she said quietly, "why now?" I looked at her. "Because respect should not arrive after death," I replied. Her lips trembled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I nodded. "I know," I said, "but we're not finished yet." That night, I sat alone in my chair by the window. The same chair they thought made me small. I looked at the streetlights and felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not pride. Not revenge. Ownership. Because once people realize they've been wrong about you, they don't change overnight. They test you. They push back. They try to take control again. And I knew. This was only the beginning. The next morning, my phone started ringing before the sun was fully up. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. I had spent too many years jumping at every sound, every call, and every demand. That morning, I made my tea first. Only then did I check the screen. My sister. My son. My niece. All missed calls. I smiled faintly. For once, they were the ones waiting. When I finally answered, it was my sister. Her voice sounded different. Careful. Good morning, she said, like we hadn't just torn through years of silence the night before. Good morning, I replied. There was a pause. We need to talk, she said. I looked out the window. We already did, I replied calmly. That wasn't a real conversation, she said quickly. People were emotional. I nodded. Yes, I replied. They were. Another pause. You embarrassed us, she added. I closed my eyes. No, I said. I surprised you. She sighed loudly. You could have handled it differently. I leaned back in my chair. I handled it honestly, I replied. She didn't like that answer. Later that afternoon, my son came by. Unannounced. He stood in the doorway like he used to when he was younger, unsure whether he was welcome. Can I come in? He asked. I stepped aside. Yes, I replied. That surprised him. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he walked around the living room, looking at things. The bookshelf, the framed photos, the small cabinet near the wall. Like he was seeing the house for the first time. You've changed, he finally said. I nodded. So have you, I replied. He sat down across from me. I didn't know, he said. I studied his face. You didn't want to, I replied gently. He flinched. I thought I was protecting you, he said. I shook my head. You were deciding for me, I replied. That's not protection. He looked down. I never thought you were capable of all that, he admitted. I smiled softly. That was convenient for you, I said. The words hung between us. He rubbed his hands together. So what happens now? He asked. I tilted my head. What do you think should happen? I asked. He hesitated. I guess we talk more. I nodded. Yes, I replied, and you listen. He tried to laugh. You always say that. I smiled. And you rarely do, I replied. That evening, messages started coming in. Cousins. Old friends. People who suddenly remembered me. Some were kind. Some were curious. Some were afraid. Because when a family story breaks, everyone wonders where they stand. One message stood out. From my niece. I didn't know Auntie. I'm sorry for laughing. I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied. Now you know. The next family gathering was scheduled quickly. Too quickly. They said it was to clear the air. I knew better. It was to regain control. When I arrived, they were already seated. They watched me walk in. This time, no one told me where to sit. I chose my place. My sister started speaking right away. We all agree things went too far, she said. I folded my hands. Yes, I replied. They did. She smiled tightly. We're a family, she continued. We should move forward. I looked around the room. At the same level, I added. The smile slipped. My nephew cleared his throat. So what exactly do you want? He asked. I looked at him. Respect, I replied. Not later, not after I'm gone, now. Silence followed. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Necessary. My son finally spoke. You're asking us to change how we see you, he said. I met his eyes. No, I replied. I'm asking you to see me at all. No one argued. Because there was nothing left to deny. As I stood to leave, my sister said quietly, You've become very confident. I paused at the door. I've always been confident, I replied. You just never listened. Outside, the air felt lighter. Inside, I knew something important. They were not done testing me, but they were done dismissing me. And that was power. The shift in their tone didn't happen all at once. It came in small changes. A softer voice here. A careful word there. A pause before speaking. They were adjusting. Not because they suddenly respected me, but because they were unsure of me now. 2 days after the gathering, my sister came by again. This time, she brought food. That alone told me something had changed. "I thought you might be tired," she said, placing the container on the counter. I thanked her, but I watched closely. Kindness from people who once looked down on you is often a negotiation. She sat across from me. "You know," she began slowly, "we always thought you were content." I raised an eyebrow. "Content with what?" I asked. She hesitated. "With letting others lead," she replied. I nodded. "That was an assumption," I said. She sighed. "Maybe we misunderstood you." I smiled politely. "You misunderstood yourselves," I replied. "You confused quiet with absence." She shifted in her seat. "That's not fair," she said. "It's accurate," I replied. Later that afternoon, my daughter called. Her voice trembled. "Mom," she said, "people are talking." I smiled faintly. "They always do," I replied. "About you," she added. "I know," I said. She paused. "They're saying you've been hiding things." I closed my eyes. "No," I replied. "I've been surviving." That silenced her. The truth was spreading now. Not the loud kind. The uncomfortable kind. The kind that makes people question their roles in someone else's story. That evening, I received an invitation. Not a request. An invitation. To sit in on a meeting I had never been asked to attend before. My name was written at the top. Not as a courtesy. As a necessity. I dressed simply. No effort to impress. No effort to disappear. Just myself. When I walked into the room, conversations stopped. Someone pulled out a chair for me. Someone asked if I needed water. I thanked them, but I didn't rush to sit. I looked around first. I wanted them to feel the weight of seeing me. My nephew spoke nervously. "We just want to make sure everyone's on the same page." I nodded. "So do I replied. They talked numbers. Plans. Future ideas. They asked for my opinion. Not once, but twice. That was new. When I finally spoke, the room listened. Not because I demanded it, but because silence no longer swallowed me. After the meeting, my sister pulled me aside. "You've changed the balance," she said quietly. I smiled. "No," I replied. "I revealed it." That night, alone again, I thought about how quickly respect changes hands. Not when you beg, but when you stand still and refuse to shrink. I realized something important then. They didn't suddenly look up to me because I had money or documents. They looked up because I stopped looking down at myself. But I also knew this truth. People who benefit from underestimating you rarely stop trying. They adapt. They smile. They wait. And I could feel it already. The next test was coming. Because when a family looks up to you for the first time, they also start wondering how much power you really have. The first real challenge came quietly. No shouting. No confrontation. Just a suggestion. And suggestions are often more dangerous than demands. My son called me 2 evenings later. Not to argue. Not to apologize. To propose something. "Mom," he said gently, "we've been talking as a family." I stayed silent. I had learned that silence makes people reveal more. "We think it might be best if we formalize things," he continued. "Formalize what?" I asked calmly. "Your role," he said. I smiled faintly. My role in my own life, I asked. He laughed nervously. No, I mean responsibilities, decision-making. I leaned back in my chair. Go on, I said. We just don't want confusion, he added. You know how people can get ideas. This would protect you. There it was again. Protection. That word had followed me like a shadow for years. Protect me from what? I asked. From pressure, he replied quickly. I nodded. And who would be protected from me? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Because he knew. The next day, the papers arrived. Not by accident. Not rushed. Carefully prepared. They called it an agreement. Shared responsibility. Clear boundaries. Support. All wrapped in soft language. I read every line slowly. And with every sentence, I saw the truth. They were trying to put me back in my place. Just with nicer words. I folded the papers and placed them back in the envelope. When my daughter came by later that evening, she smiled too brightly. We just want what's best for you, she said. I looked at her. Then why does this take my voice away? I asked. She blinked. It doesn't, she said quickly. It just guides it. I nodded. That's what a leash does too, I replied. Her smile faded. That night, I did not sleep well. Not from fear. From disappointment. I had hoped they would learn faster. But habits built on comfort take time to break. The following afternoon, my sister came over again. No food this time. Just concern. You're making things difficult, she said gently. I met her eyes. Difficult for who? I asked. She sighed. For everyone. I smiled softly. For everyone who benefited from me being small, I replied. She sat down heavily. You're changing the family, she said. I nodded. That was always going to happen, I replied. You're putting us in uncomfortable positions, she added. I leaned forward. So was I said, for years. She shook her head. You don't need all this power, she said. I paused. Power. There it was. I don't need power, I replied. I need agency. She frowned. That sounds the same. It isn't, I said. The pressure increased after that. Subtle comments. Side conversations. Private messages that weren't meant for me but reached me anyway. They were circling, trying to see where I would bend. At the next family gathering, they watched me closely. Every word I said. Every decision I made. They waited for me to slip. I didn't. When my nephew suggested a plan and looked around for approval, he stopped halfway through. He looked at me. What do you think, Auntie? He asked. The room went quiet. I smiled. I think you should finish your thought, I replied. Then I'll respond. And he did. Because now my presence mattered. Later that evening, my son pulled me aside. You're enjoying this, he said quietly. I shook my head. I'm enduring it, I replied. There's a difference. He studied my face. You're not backing down, he said. I met his eyes. No, I replied. I'm standing up. That night, alone again, I wrote one sentence in my notebook. They looked down on me because it was easy. Now they look up because they must. But I knew. The real test hadn't come yet. Because families don't give up control without trying one last thing. And I could feel it coming. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The boldest move always comes disguised as concern. I realized that the morning my daughter showed up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She hugged me longer than usual. You okay, Mom? She asked softly. I am, I replied. She nodded, but her hands stayed on my shoulders a little too long, like she was checking something invisible. We've been worried, she said as we sat down. I stirred my tea. You've said that before, I replied. Yes, but this time it's different, she said quickly. People are noticing changes. I looked up. What kind of changes? I asked. She hesitated. That you're more forceful. I smiled faintly. Do you mean present? I asked. She looked away. Later that day, my son called. His voice was calm, too calm. Mom, he said, we need to talk about something important. I leaned back in my chair. I'm listening, I replied. There's a meeting tomorrow, he continued, with a few professionals. Professionals for what? I asked. He cleared his throat. Just to make sure you're not under stress. There it was. The word they always used when they wanted control. Stress. I didn't argue. I didn't refuse. I said one word. All right. That surprised him. That night, I barely slept. Not from fear. From clarity. I knew exactly what they were trying to do. They weren't testing my strength anymore. They were questioning my mind. And that was dangerous. The next day, they picked me up together. My son drove. My daughter sat beside him. I sat in the back seat. Like a child. They talked over me the whole way. About traffic. About work. About plans. As if I wasn't there. As if nothing had changed. But everything had. We arrived at a quiet building. Clean. Bright. Smelling like disinfectant and false reassurance. My son turned around and smiled. This is just routine, he said. Nothing to worry about. I nodded. I'm not worried, I replied. That unsettled him. Inside, a woman with kind eyes greeted us. Mrs. Brooks, she asked. Yes, I replied. She smiled. Please come in. My son stood up too. She'll go in alone, the woman said gently. My son hesitated. Then sat back down. That was the first crack. The room was quiet. 2 chairs. A small table. The woman sat across from me. She didn't rush. She didn't look at the file first. She looked at me. How are you feeling today? She asked. I answered honestly. Clear, I said. Her pen paused. She asked questions. Simple ones. About my day. My family. My choices. I answered calmly. Clearly. Not once did my words stumble. Not once did my thoughts drift. After a while, she leaned back. Mrs. Brooks, she said gently, do you know why you're here? Yes, I replied. She smiled. Why? She asked. Because my family is uncomfortable with my confidence, I said. She blinked, then smiled wider. When the session ended, she walked me back to the waiting area. My son stood up quickly. Well, he asked. She looked at him calmly. Your mother is fully capable, she said, and very aware. His face tightened. On the drive home, no one spoke. Not one word. The silence felt heavy. But not on me. That evening, my phone buzzed. A message from my sister. This is getting out of hand. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back. Only if you try to control it. As I set the phone down, I realized something important. They had played their strongest card. And it failed. Which meant the next move would be desperate. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Desperation doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispers lies and hopes you don't hear the fear inside them. After the appointment, my family became careful. Too careful. They checked in more. Smiled more. Agreed with me more. And that was how I knew something else was coming. My sister invited me over for lunch 2 days later. Just the 2 of us. No family meeting. No witnesses. I miss us, she said as she poured the soup. I nodded. So do I replied. But I watched her hands. They were shaking. She sat down and leaned closer. You scared them, she said quietly. I lifted my spoon. Good, I replied. She sighed. That wasn't what I meant. I know, I said calmly. They think you're unpredictable now, she continued. I smiled faintly. That's what people say when they can't control you, I replied. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She hesitated, then said it. We're worried about the papers you showed us. I set my spoon down. Which papers? I asked. She swallowed. All of them. I leaned back. Why? I asked. She looked away. Because they change things. There it was. The truth. Slipping out. They change the story you've been telling yourselves, I said. She didn't deny it. Later that evening, my nephew called. His voice was rushed. Auntie, he said, I just wanted to check something. I waited. There's no plan to sell anything, right? He asked. I raised an eyebrow. What makes you ask? I replied. He hesitated. Just curious. I smiled. Curiosity usually comes with information. Speech balloon, I replied. Silence. That silence told me everything. They were talking without me again. And this time, they were nervous. The slip came 2 nights later. My son came over unannounced. His face was tight. We need to clear something up, he said. I gestured for him to sit. Then speak, I replied. There was a misunderstanding, he began. Some people thought you might. Might what? I asked calmly. He stopped. Might make decisions that affect everyone, he finished. I nodded. Like you've been doing for years, I asked. His jaw clenched. That's not fair. It's accurate, I replied. He leaned forward. Someone told us you contacted a lawyer, he said. I smiled slowly. That's interesting, I replied, because I didn't tell anyone that. His eyes widened. Just slightly. Enough. I stood up. You should be careful, I said gently. Careful of what? He snapped. Of revealing what you're afraid of, I replied. He stood too. You don't trust us anymore, he said. I met his eyes. You never trusted me, I replied. He left without another word. And that night, I didn't feel fear. I felt confirmation. They weren't worried about my health. They weren't worried about stress. They were worried about losing access. To decisions. To influence. To power. I sat by the window again, notebook in my lap. I wrote another sentence. When people look up to you suddenly, check their hands. They may still be reaching for control. Because I knew now. Someone had talked too much. Someone had slipped. Someone had revealed what they were planning. And once plans are exposed, the game changes. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. After my son left that night, I did not cry. That surprised me. There was a time when his anger would shake me, when his sharp words would stay in my chest for days. But that night, I felt steady. Because fear no longer lived in me. Understanding did. The next morning, I received a message meant for someone else. It came from my niece. Auntie, did you hear what Uncle said? I don't feel right about this. I read it twice. Then a third time. Because now I knew for sure. Someone had crossed a line. I replied carefully. What did he say? The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, the message came through. They were talking about stopping you before you change things too much. My hands did not shake. My heart did not race. Instead, Something cold and clear settled inside me, stopping me, not helping me, not supporting me, stopping me. That afternoon, my sister called again. Her voice sounded tired now. Not strong. Not sure. "We need to talk," she said. I smiled faintly. "Yes," I replied, "we do." She came over just before sunset. She didn't bring food. She didn't bring excuses. She sat down slowly, like the weight of the moment had finally reached her. "You're making everyone uneasy," she said. I nodded. "I know," I replied. "That wasn't your role," she added. I looked at her. "That wasn't my choice," I replied. She rubbed her forehead. "They think you're going to turn things upside down," she said. I leaned forward. "I already have," I replied. Her eyes widened. "They're afraid," she admitted quietly. I studied her face. "Afraid of what?" I asked. She hesitated. "Of losing control," she said. There it was. Out loud. I sat back. "Then they should have treated me better," I replied. She didn't argue. Because she couldn't. Later that night, my daughter came by alone. No warning. She stood in the doorway, unsure. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. "Yes," I replied. She didn't sit. She paced. "I didn't know they were talking like that," she said quickly. I nodded. "I believe you," I replied. Her shoulders dropped. "They think you're going to rewrite everything," she said. I smiled gently. "I'm just correcting it," I replied. She stopped packing. "They never thought you would push back," she whispered. I met her eyes. "I never thought I had permission," I replied. She sat down slowly. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I thought carefully. "Nothing loud," I said. "Nothing cruel. Just nothing obedient." She swallowed. That night, I slept well. Because plans made in shadows don't survive daylight. And daylight was coming. The next family meeting was tense. Everyone spoke carefully. No jokes. No teasing. They were watching me. Me. My nephew spoke first. "We need transparency," he said. I nodded. "Agreed," I replied. That startled him. My son cleared his throat. "We should all be on the same page," he added. I smiled. "Then stop writing pages without me," I replied. The room went still. They didn't argue. They didn't laugh. They listened. Because they had no choice now. As I looked around the table, I saw it clearly. They no longer looked down on me. They looked at me. And that frightened them more than anything else ever had. Because once someone sees you clearly, they can never pretend again. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The mistake they made was thinking fear would make me quiet again. It didn't. It made me precise. The week after that meeting felt heavy. Not loud. Not dramatic. Heavy in the way clouds sit low before a storm. Calls stopped coming as often. Messages became short. Plans were suddenly still being discussed. They were regrouping. And when people regroup, they usually decide who they can sacrifice. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. From a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Brooks," a man asked politely. "Yes," I replied. "This is Mr. Allen. I'm calling regarding a request made on your behalf." My stomach tightened slightly. "A request?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "about transferring certain responsibilities." I stood up slowly. "I didn't make any request," I said. There was a pause. "Oh," he replied, "then we may have a problem." That word stayed with me. Problem. He explained carefully. Someone had contacted his office, claiming to act in my interest. They had asked questions, requested documents, suggested changes, all under my name. My hands clenched. Who? I asked. I can't disclose that just yet, he replied, but I wanted to confirm your consent. You don't have it, I said firmly. When the call ended, I sat down slowly. So this was it. They hadn't just talked. They had acted. That evening, my son came over again. This time, he didn't knock. He walked in like he still owned the place. We need to talk, he said. I didn't offer him a seat. I already did, I replied, with someone you contacted pretending to be me. His face drained of color. That's not what it looks like, he said quickly. Then explain, I replied calmly. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. We were trying to help, he said. I laughed. Not loudly. Just once. Help doesn't wear my name like a mask, I replied. He rubbed his face. You don't understand how complicated this is, he said. I stepped closer. I understand exactly how simple it is, I replied. You thought I wouldn't find out. His shoulders sagged. My sister arrived minutes later. Then my daughter. They stood together now. A united front. Or so they thought. You went too far, my daughter whispered. Yes, I replied. You did. My sister shook her head. We were scared, she said. Of me, I asked. She didn't answer. You looked down on me for years, I said quietly. And the moment I stood up, you tried to sit me back down. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. My son spoke again. We can fix this, he said. We just need to move forward. I looked at him. No, I replied. You need to move back. That was the moment everything changed. Because he realized then. He no longer spoke for me. He spoke to me. And that terrified him. I picked up my phone. I've already clarified things, I said. And tomorrow, I'll be clarifying more. My sister's eyes widened. What do you mean? She asked. I mean, I replied, you don't get to make decisions quietly anymore. They left soon after. Not angry. Afraid. That night, I wrote again in my notebook. The moment they tried to speak as me was the moment they lost the right to speak over me. Because now, the truth wasn't just emotional. It was documented. And once truth has paper, it doesn't stay buried. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The panic didn't come right away. At first, they acted calm. Too calm. The next morning, my phone stayed silent. No calls, no messages, no checking in. That silence told me more than any argument ever could. They were scrambling. By noon, the calls started. Not from family. From offices. Polite voices asking careful questions. Each call confirmed the same thing. Someone had tried to move things without my permission. And now, people wanted answers. That afternoon, my daughter came back alone. Her eyes were red. Mom, she said softly, this is getting serious. I nodded. It already was, I replied. She sat down slowly. They're asking questions, she said, about signatures, about instructions. I met her eyes. And what are you telling them? I asked. She hesitated. The truth, she whispered. That word hung between us. Truth. She had avoided it for years. Now it was unavoidable. I didn't know they went that far, she said. I believed her. But belief didn't erase harm. I know, I replied, but knowing late still costs something. She wiped her face. Are you going to report this? She asked. I didn't answer right away. I wanted her to feel the weight of the question. Why do you ask? I said. Because, she replied, it could change everything. I nodded. Yes, I said, it already has. That evening, my sister called again. This time, she didn't pretend. Please, she said, let's slow down. I closed my eyes. You didn't slow down when you acted in my name, I replied. We thought we were protecting the family, she said. By erasing me, I asked. She went quiet. I raised you, I continued calmly. I carried you when you couldn't walk. And you still thought I wouldn't notice. Her voice broke. We were wrong, she said. I nodded. Yes, I replied, you were. The next day, the meeting happened. Not the family kind. The official kind. I sat straight in my chair. Answered every question clearly. No shaking. No confusion. No fear. Just truth. When it was over, the man looked at me and said, You were right to come forward. I thanked him. And I meant it. That night, my son didn't come by. He didn't call. He didn't text. Because this time, there was nothing he could explain away. I sat by the window again, watching the streetlights come on. I felt something settle in my chest. Not victory. Relief. Because for the first time, I wasn't defending myself. I was standing in facts. And facts don't bend for family. But I also knew something else. This wasn't finished. Not yet. Because when control slips through someone's fingers, they often grab tighter. And my family hadn't made their final move. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Families don't fall apart all at once. They fracture. Quietly. Along old cracks no one wanted to admit were there. The first crack showed itself the next morning. My niece called me early, her voice shaking. Auntie, she said, I need to tell you something. I sat down slowly. Go on, I replied. They're blaming each other, she whispered. I closed my eyes. I had expected that. She told me how the conversation went. How my sister said my son pushed too hard. How my son said my sister encouraged it. How my daughter cried and said she just followed along. No one wanted to be the villain. Everyone wanted to be the helper. They're scared, my niece said. Yes, I replied. Fear loosens tongues. Later that day, my sister came over again. This time, she didn't knock. She opened the door and stood there like someone who had lost her footing. I didn't know he would go that far, she said immediately. I gestured for her to sit. You still stood beside him, I replied. She sat heavily. I trusted him, she said. I nodded. And he trusted that you wouldn't stop him, I replied. Her eyes filled with tears. We thought we were doing what was best, she said. For whom? I asked gently. She didn't answer. An hour later, my son called. His voice was sharp now. Defensive. They're throwing me under the bus, he said. I stayed silent. You know that's not fair, he continued. This wasn't just me. I finally spoke. Fair left the room when you signed my name, I replied. He inhaled sharply. They encouraged me, he insisted. I nodded. I believe you, I replied. He paused. But, I continued, you still chose to act. Silence. That silence was loud. Because he realized then. He was alone. That evening, the family group chat exploded. Messages flying. Accusations wrapped in politeness. Apologies with conditions. Explanations that explained nothing. I didn't respond. I watched. Someone finally typed. We need to decide how to handle Mom. I smiled faintly. They still thought they could handle me. My daughter sent a private message. I'm scared. I didn't mean for this to happen. I replied simply. Intent doesn't erase impact. She didn't respond after that. The final crack came when my sister called late at night. Her voice was low. "They want to say it was your idea," she admitted. I laughed quietly. "Of course they do," I replied. "They think if they say you were confused." I interrupted her. "If they say that," I said calmly, "they will regret it." She swallowed. "I believe you," she whispered. That night, I slept deeply. Because the truth had done its work. It had separated the strong from the fearful, the honest from the convenient. In the morning, my son came by again. He looked smaller. Not weak. Just unsure. "I didn't think you'd fight back," he admitted. I met his eyes. "I didn't think I had to," I replied. He sat down slowly. "What do you want?" he asked. I considered the question carefully. "I want you to understand," I said, "that looking down on someone doesn't mean they're below you. It just means you never bothered to look closely." He nodded slowly. "I was wrong," he said. I believed him. But belief didn't mean surrender. As he stood to leave, he paused. "They don't know what to do anymore," he said. I smiled. "Neither do I replied, "and that's okay. Because uncertainty doesn't scare someone who finally trusts herself." Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. When trouble stays inside a family, it feels survivable. But once it steps outside the house, it grows teeth. The first sign came from the neighbors. Not questions. Whispers. I noticed it when I walked to the mailbox one morning and two women across the street stopped talking mid-sentence. They smiled too quickly, looked away too fast. I had lived on that street for years. They had never looked at me like that before. Later that day, an old friend called. Her voice was cautious. "I just wanted to check on you," she said. "I'm fine," I replied. She hesitated. "I heard there's been some family tension." I smiled faintly. "That's one way to say it," I replied. The story was leaking. Not the whole truth. Pieces. Bent ones. Carefully shaped ones. And I knew who was shaping them. That evening, my sister came by again. She looked tired. "They're talking," she said. I nodded. "They always do," I replied. "No," she insisted. "I mean people." I met her eyes. "About me?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "They're saying you're confused," she admitted. "That stress made you imagine things." That we stepped in to help. I felt a quiet heat rise in my chest. Not anger. Resolve. "So," I said calmly, "they chose that story." She swallowed. "Yes." I nodded. "Then they've made their choice," I replied. The next morning, a letter arrived. Official. Carefully worded. Asking for clarification. Requesting a meeting. My name printed clearly at the top. I smiled. Because lies don't survive paperwork. When I told my daughter about the letter, she panicked. "This is getting too big," she said. I nodded. "Yes," I replied, "it is." "You don't have to do this," she pleaded. I looked at her gently. "I already am," I replied. That night, my son finally admitted the truth. Not to me. To others. He tried to soften it. But the damage was done. Because once people hear two versions of a story, they start asking questions. At the next community meeting, conversations stopped when I walked in. Not because I was small. Because I was visible. Someone offered me a seat near the front. Someone asked my opinion. Someone waited for me to speak. And for the first time, my family saw it. Saw the shift. Saw the reversal. My sister whispered, "They're listening to you." I leaned closer. "They always should have," I replied. That night, alone again, I understood something important. The moment people look up to you publicly, Those who once looked down on you privately feel exposed. And exposure makes people desperate. Because now, the family wasn't just managing me. They were being watched. And that changed everything. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Desperation has a pattern. First, people deny. Then they explain. Then they rewrite. My family had reached the rewrite stage. The call came early the next morning. A group call. All of them. That alone told me this wasn't about checking on me. It was about strategy. "We think it's time we speak as one," my sister said carefully. I stayed silent. Silence had become my strongest tool. "We don't want outsiders misunderstanding what's happening," my son added. I smiled faintly. "Outsiders misunderstand when insiders lie," I replied. The line went quiet. My daughter spoke next. "We just want to protect the family name." I nodded. "And whose name did you use when you acted without permission?" I asked. No one answered. They proposed a statement. Soft words. Shared responsibility. No blame. They wanted me to agree. They wanted my quiet approval. "If we release this together," my sister said, "it will calm things down." I leaned back. "It will calm you down," I replied. "And you?" my son asked sharply. "I'll be erased," I replied calmly. "That's not true," my daughter said quickly. I sighed. "Then explain why my voice isn't in your statement," I replied. Another silence. They tried another angle. "People respect you," my nephew said. "If you support this, they'll move on." I smiled. "They respect me because I finally spoke," I replied. "Not because I stayed quiet." The truth was simple. They wanted me present, but not powerful. Seen, but not heard. Visible, but not decisive. And I was done with that version of myself. "I won't sign anything," I said clearly. The air changed instantly. "You're making a mistake," my son said. "No," I replied. "I'm ending one." Later that day, rumors shifted again. Some said I was stubborn. Others said I was brave. A few said I was dangerous. I didn't correct any of them. Truth doesn't need defending when time is on its side. That evening, my niece came by quietly. She closed the door behind her. "They're scared of you now," she whispered. I smiled gently. "They're scared of losing control," I replied. She nodded. "I'm on your side," she said. I believed her. As night fell, I sat by the window again. The same chair. The same street. Different woman. I realized something then. Looking up to someone doesn't always mean admiration. Sometimes it means fear. And fear, when paired with pride, makes people reckless. I knew the next move wouldn't be quiet. It would be public. And once it happened, there would be no turning back. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The final move came sooner than I expected. It arrived dressed as clarification. A public explanation. Carefully worded. Softly framed. Dangerous. I saw it first on my phone. A message from an old neighbor. "Have you seen what they posted?" My chest tightened, but my hands stayed steady. I opened the link. There it was. A statement. Signed by my son and my sister. They said they were concerned. They said I was under pressure. They said they had stepped in out of love. They never said my name. But everyone knew it was about me. I read it slowly. Every word. Every lie wrapped in kindness. They didn't accuse me directly. They didn't have to. They let implication do the work. Within minutes, messages poured in. Some confused. Some supportive. Some quietly judging. I didn't respond. Not yet. An hour later, my daughter called, crying. They posted it, she said. I didn't know they would. I closed my eyes. They told you, I replied. You just hoped they wouldn't. She went quiet. You need to say something, she pleaded. Before people decide for you. I looked out the window. For years, I said calmly, people decided for me. She sniffed. This is different. Yes, I replied. Now I decide. I didn't rush. That was important. I made tea. I sat down. I read the statement again. Because panic helps liars. Calm helps truth. Then I made one call. Just one. Not to family. To someone who had watched everything quietly. Someone who respected facts. By evening, a second statement appeared. This one was short. Clear. Signed by me. I didn't explain everything. I didn't attack anyone. I simply said this. That I was capable. That I had not given permission. That my voice mattered. Nothing more. Nothing less. The reaction was immediate. People started asking questions. Real ones. Not whispers. Not guesses. Questions. The comments changed. The tone shifted. Confusion turned into doubt. Doubt turned into scrutiny. And scrutiny is where lies begin to crack. My sister called that night, furious. You blindsided us, she said. I smiled faintly. You tried to speak for me, I replied. I corrected it. You made us look bad, she snapped. No, I replied. You did that yourselves. My son texted. You didn't have to go public. I replied. You already did. The next day, people looked at me differently. Not with pity. With respect. Some with admiration. Some with guilt. At the market, a woman touched my arm gently. I'm glad you spoke, she said. I thanked her. Because she wasn't just talking about me. She was talking about herself too. That afternoon, the phone rang again. A new voice. Professional. Interested. They wanted to hear my side. Fully. Properly. I hung up slowly and smiled. Because once truth reaches the right ears, it doesn't go back to sleep. That evening, my family went silent. No calls. No messages. They had made their final move. And it had failed. But I knew something else. When people lose publicly, they don't retreat quietly. They regroup. They plan. They wait. And the way my son looked at me the last time we crossed paths told me the next confrontation would be personal. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. They didn't plan the confrontation. That was the first mistake. Because when people confront you without a plan, they reveal exactly who they are. My son showed up just after sunset. Alone. No warning. No message. He stood at the door, longer than usual, before knocking. When I opened it, he didn't greet me. He just said, "We need to talk now." I stepped aside. "Come in," I replied. He didn't sit. He paced. Back and forth. Like the floor couldn't decide whether to hold him. "You embarrassed us," he said suddenly. I closed the door gently behind him. "You embarrassed yourselves," I replied. He stopped packing. "That statement you released," he said, pointing at me. "You made it sound like we were trying to control you." I met his eyes. "You tried to control me," I said calmly. "That's not what we meant," he snapped. "What you meant doesn't matter anymore," I replied. "What you did does." He rubbed his face hard. "You don't understand the pressure we're under now," he said. I nodded. "I do," I replied. "I lived under it for years." He finally sat down. Hard. They're asking questions, he said. People I can't ignore. I folded my hands. They asked me questions too, I replied. I answered them. He laughed bitterly. You always make things sound so simple. I leaned forward. Truth usually is, I said. The front door opened again. This time, my sister walked in. She didn't ask permission. She didn't apologize. She went straight to the point. You could have handled this quietly, she said. I looked at her. So could you, I replied. My daughter followed behind her. Her eyes were swollen. She didn't speak. She sat down slowly, like she already knew this conversation wouldn't save anything. We're family, my sister said. We don't do things like this to each other. I tilted my head. Do what? I asked. Tell the truth. Refuse silence. Protect myself. She pressed her lips together. You made us look like villains. I nodded. Then stop acting like ones, I replied. My son stood again. You've changed, he said sharply. I smiled faintly. No, I replied. I've stopped pretending. Silence fell. Thick. Uncomfortable. Necessary. My daughter finally spoke. Mom, were we really that bad to you? I looked at her. I didn't soften my voice. I didn't raise it either. You didn't look up, I said. And when you don't look up, you step on people. Her face crumpled. That's not fair, my sister said quickly. I nodded. Neither was being dismissed my whole life, I replied. My son exhaled loudly. So what do you want from us? He asked. I considered the question. Not emotionally. Carefully. I want you to stop trying to manage me, I said. Stop rewriting my story. And stop being surprised when I speak. They exchanged looks. Old habits searching for an opening. They didn't find one. Because the woman sitting in front of them was not the woman they used to talk over. And they could feel it. That was when my son said the thing he could never take back. If you keep this up, he said, voice tight, you're going to lose your family. The room froze. I stood up slowly, walked closer, met his eyes, and replied softly, I already lost the version of you that mattered. No one spoke after that. Not because they had nothing to say, but because they finally understood. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't anger. This was permanent. And the next move would decide who stayed in my life at all. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The words my son said stayed in the room long after he stopped speaking. You're going to lose your family. For years, that sentence would have crushed me. That night, it didn't. Because I finally understood something I hadn't before. You can't lose what never stood beside you. My sister was the first to recover. That was too far, she said to my son. He looked at her sharply. You were thinking it too, he snapped. She didn't deny it. She just looked away. My daughter stood up suddenly. Stop, she said, all of you. Her voice shook, but she didn't sit back down. You're talking like she's a problem to solve, she continued. Not a person. I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time in a long while, I saw my child, not an echo of others. My son scoffed. You don't get it, he said. She's tearing everything apart. I shook my head slowly. No, I replied. I'm refusing to hold it together alone. That landed hard. My sister crossed her arms. So what now? She asked. You walk away. I considered her question. I stop shrinking, I replied. What you do after that is your choice. My son laughed once. Short, bitter. You think people will stick around once you stop being useful? He asked. I met his eyes. I think the right ones already are, I replied. He stepped closer. That confidence you found, he said, it's going to cost you. I didn't step back. It already did, I replied. It cost me silence. That was when he crossed the line. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. Thick. Worn. He slapped it onto the table. I didn't want to do this, he said, but you left me no choice. My sister stiffened. What is that? She asked. He didn't answer her. He looked at me. I kept records too, he said. Things you don't remember agreeing to. Conversations you don't recall. My heart stayed calm. Because I knew. You're trying to question my memory, I said quietly. He nodded. You said it yourself, he replied. People think you're under pressure. The room went cold. My daughter stepped back. You promised you wouldn't, she whispered. He ignored her. If this keeps going, he continued, I'll have to show this. I smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was revealing. You just proved my point, I said. He frowned. What point? He asked. That you still think fear will make me quiet, I replied. I picked up the folder. Didn't open it. Just held it. You should be careful, I said calmly. When you try to erase someone, you leave fingerprints. His confidence flickered. Just for a moment. My sister finally spoke. This isn't protection, she said slowly. This is control. He turned on her. You're backing her now, he demanded. She swallowed. I'm backing truth, she replied. The room split right there. Not by shouting. By realization. I placed the folder back on the table. I won't fight you, I said to my son. But I won't follow you either. He stared at me. You'll regret this, he said. I nodded. Maybe, I replied, but not as much as I regret staying quiet. He left without another word. The door closed hard behind him. My daughter sank into the chair. I didn't know he'd go that far, she said. I put a hand on her shoulder. Now you do, I replied. My sister looked at me with something new in her eyes. Not pity. Not superiority. Respect. I'm sorry, she said. I nodded. I know, I replied. That night, as the house settled into silence again, I wrote one last line in my notebook. When someone threatens your mind, they've already lost the argument. Because now, the truth wasn't just public. It was personal. And the final reckoning was coming. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The days after my son left were quiet. Too quiet. Not the peaceful kind. The waiting kind. I didn't hear from him. No calls. No messages. No apologies dressed as concern. That silence was deliberate. He was waiting for fear to do the work he couldn't. But fear didn't come. Clarity did. 3 mornings later, the letter arrived. Not handwritten. Typed. Official. It said my son had submitted information, questioning my ability to manage my affairs. Reading it didn't hurt. What hurt was how familiar the language was. It echoed years of being spoken over. Decided for. Managed. I folded the letter calmly, placed it beside the others, and made one phone call. The meeting happened 2 days later. Small room. Neutral walls. Clear eyes across the table. They asked questions. I answered. Slowly. Clearly. Fully. When they showed me what my son had submitted, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was thin. Old messages taken out of context. Moments of stress framed as confusion. Care turned into weakness. The woman across from me looked up. Do you understand what's being implied here? She asked gently. Yes, I replied. And, she prompted, I understand why he tried, I said, but not why he thought it would work. She smiled. They asked me to explain my choices. I did. They asked me to explain my plans. I did. They asked me to explain my boundaries. I did. Not once did my voice shake. At the end, the man closed the folder. Mrs. Brooks, he said, there's no evidence here to support the claims. I nodded. I know, I replied. That afternoon, my son finally called. His voice was tight. They contacted me, he said. I waited. They said it didn't go anywhere. I nodded. I'm not surprised, I replied. You didn't have to push back so hard, he said. I closed my eyes. You pushed first, I replied. Silence. They think you're capable, he said finally. I smiled faintly. I've always been, I replied. He exhaled sharply. So what now? He asked. I thought carefully. Now, I said, you decide whether you want to know me or control me. He didn't answer. That evening, my daughter came by. She hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, she whispered. I held her a little longer. Thank you, I replied. My sister called later. They told him to back off, she said. I nodded. Good, I replied. She hesitated. He didn't expect that. I smiled. People rarely expect resistance from those they underestimate, I replied. That night, I slept deeply. Because the threat had been tested. And it had failed. But I knew something important. People who lose control once don't always accept it. They change tactics. They change tone. They change masks. And the way my son's voice sounded before he hung up told me he wasn't done trying to decide how this would end. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Power does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives with a choice. And that week I made mine. I stopped explaining. That was the first change. No more long calls. No more careful words. No more trying to make people understand what they refuse to see. I answered when I wanted. I spoke when it mattered. I rested when I needed. And that unsettled everyone. My son noticed first. He called again, trying a new tone. Softer. Careful. Mom, he said, I've been thinking. I stayed quiet. That whole thing, maybe we both went too far, he added. I smiled faintly. Maybe, I replied. He waited. I didn't add anything. You're not saying much, he said. I've already said what matters, I replied. That silence frightened him more than anger ever could. That afternoon, I did something I had never done before. I moved money. Not secretly. Not defensively. Deliberately. I changed access. Updated names. Closed doors that never should have been open. When the confirmation message came, I sat very still and felt something settle in me. Safety. Later that day, my sister came by. She looked around the house slowly, like she was seeing it differently. You're serious, she said. I nodded. I always was, I replied. She sat down. They can't reach things the way they used to, she said. I met her eyes. That's the point, I replied. She hesitated. You know this changes everything. I smiled. Yes, I said, that's why I did it. Word spread quickly. Not in anger. In whispers. She's firm now. She's not asking anymore. She's in control. People who once looked down on me now spoke carefully. Measured. Respect does that. My daughter called that evening. They're panicking, she said quietly. I nodded. I expected that, I replied. They don't know how to talk to you now, she added. I smiled. Good, I said. They'll learn. That night, my son showed up again. But he didn't knock. He waited. Outside. Like someone unsure of his place. I opened the door slowly. Yes, I asked. He swallowed. Can we talk? He asked. I considered him. Then stepped aside. For a few minutes, I replied. He sat on the edge of the chair. Not relaxed. Not confident. I feel like I'm losing you, he said. I looked at him. No, I replied. You're losing control over me. He winced. You're shutting us out, he said. I shook my head. I'm shutting doors that should have had locks years ago, I replied. He stared at the floor. I don't know how to talk to you anymore, he admitted. I leaned forward. Try listening, I said. He nodded slowly. I don't want us to be enemies, he said. I softened, just a little. Then stop treating me like one, I replied. When he left, I didn't feel relief. I felt certainty. Because power had shifted. Not because I took it, but because I stopped giving it away. And I knew. The next confrontation wouldn't be about confrontation. It would be about consequences. Quiet ones. Lasting ones. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Distance doesn't always arrive with slammed doors. Sometimes it arrives with fewer questions, fewer opinions, fewer assumptions. The days that followed were quiet in a new way. Not tense, not heavy, just spacious. No one checked my calendar. No one reminded me of appointments. No one asked what I planned to do next. For the first time, my time felt like it belonged to me. My phone stayed mostly silent. When it rang, it was friends. Old ones. People who spoke to me, not about me. How are you really? They asked. And for the first time, my answer wasn't polite. I'm steady, I replied. My family struggled with the silence. I could feel it. They were used to access, to answers, to my availability. Now they had to wait. My daughter adapted first. She stopped explaining others to me. She stopped apologizing on their behalf. Instead, she asked real questions. What do you want? How do you feel about this? Those questions healed more than apologies ever could. My sister took longer. She called once, then hung up before I could answer. Called again the next day. You're different, she said softly. I smiled. Yes, I replied. She sighed. I don't know where I fit anymore. I answered gently. That's something you'll have to discover without standing on me. She was quiet for a long time. I hear you, she said finally. And I believed her. My son struggled the most. Distance unsettles those who relied on closeness as leverage. He sent short messages. Neutral ones. How are you? Hope you're well. I replied when I wanted. Briefly. Honestly. One evening, he called and said something that surprised me. I don't know how to earn your trust back. I considered his words carefully. Start by respecting my no, I replied. He nodded slowly. I can try, he said. That was the first honest thing he'd said in a long time. Weeks passed. The world adjusted. So did I. I walked differently. Spoke differently. I no longer shrank my sentences. I finished them. At a small gathering, someone introduced me as the backbone of her family. I smiled. Not because it was flattering. Because it was finally accurate. That night, alone again, I looked at my reflection. I didn't see a woman who had one. I saw a woman who had returned to herself. And I understood something important. Looking up to someone isn't about height. It's about clarity. They finally saw me clearly. And clarity changes how people behave. But clarity also reveals loss. And my family was beginning to realize. They had lost the version of me they could control. Forever. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Acceptance doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in small surrenders. The first surrender came from my sister. She showed up one afternoon without an agenda. No folder. No advice. No concern dressed as kindness. She just stood at the door and said, "I don't need anything. I just wanted to see you." That was new. We sat together quietly. Not talking much. Not fixing anything. Just being. After a while, she said softly, "I think I spent too many years standing on you." I didn't rush to comfort her. I didn't rush to correct her. I let the truth breathe. "Yes," I replied, "you did." She nodded. "I'm sorry," she said. I believed her. Because this apology didn't ask for forgiveness. It acknowledged harm. My daughter came next. Not physically. Emotionally. She stopped asking me to smooth things over. Stopped saying, "That's just how they are." One evening she said, "I'm learning to stop explaining people who hurt me." I smiled. "That lesson travels well," I replied. The hardest surrender came last. From my son. He didn't announce it. He didn't apologize in a speech. He let go quietly. He stopped trying to influence. Stopped hinting. Stopped hovering. Weeks passed without tension. Just space. Healthy space. One afternoon, he sent a message that changed everything. "I see now that I loved you best when you were quiet." That wasn't love, that was comfort. I read it slowly. Twice. Then once more. I replied honestly. "I loved you even when it cost me myself." That wasn't love either, that was fear. He didn't respond right away. But he didn't argue. And that told me he finally understood. At the next family gathering, something was different. No one spoke over me. No one rushed me. When I spoke, they waited. Not politely. Respectfully. Someone asked my opinion. Then listened. Another nodded. Another wrote it down. I noticed everything. Later, my sister leaned over and whispered, "They look up to you now." I smiled gently. "They always could have," I replied. That night, as I sat alone again, I felt no need to review the past. No need to replay pain. No need to prove anything. Because power had done its quiet work. I had not demanded it. I had not taken it. I had kept it. And the family that once looked down on me now adjusted their posture naturally. Not because they were afraid, but because they finally understood. Still, I knew one thing. Acceptance is not the end. It is the beginning of a new balance. But about legacy. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Legacy isn't something you leave behind. It's something you live loud enough for others to remember. Once the noise died down, I noticed something unexpected. People started coming to me. Not to manage me. Not to question me. To ask. A neighbor stopped me one morning as I watered my plants. "How did you do it?" she asked quietly. I smiled. "Stopped explaining myself," I replied. She nodded like that answer unlocked something inside her. Another woman from church sat beside me one afternoon. "I'm tired of being strong for everyone but myself," she said. I took her hand. "Then rest," I replied. "Strength grows back differently." I didn't plan to become an example. But examples don't ask permission. They just exist. My daughter noticed it first. "People look at you differently now," she said one evening. I shrugged. They always did, I replied. They just didn't listen. She smiled. I'm listening now, she said. That mattered more than she knew. With the family calm, something else rose. Clarity. What I wanted. What I wouldn't accept. What I would leave behind. I reviewed my papers again. Not with fear. With intention. Who would inherit what? Who would be trusted? Who would learn instead of take? It wasn't about punishment. It was about alignment. My sister asked one day, "You're being very careful." I nodded. I wasn't allowed to be careless with myself, I replied. So I won't be careless with my legacy. She didn't argue. My son stayed quiet during this time. Observant. Respectful. Different. He asked once, "Do you ever regret how things happened?" I thought for a moment. "I regret the silence," I replied. "Not the awakening." He nodded slowly. That night, I sat with my notebook again. But this time, I didn't write about pain. I wrote about values. What mattered? What lasted? What deserved to continue? I realized then. The greatest shift wasn't that my family looked up to me. It was that I no longer needed them to. Because legacy isn't about being remembered as kind. It's about being remembered as whole. And the decisions I was about to make would shape more than my family. They would shape the story they tell after I'm gone. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Not everyone likes clarity, especially those who benefited from confusion. The first sign came when my son noticed changes. Not big ones, small ones. He realized he wasn't copied on certain conversations anymore. That decisions were made without his input. That plans didn't revolve around his approval. He didn't complain, but I could feel the discomfort in his pauses. One afternoon, he asked carefully, "Are you changing things?" I looked at him. "I'm organizing them," I replied. He nodded slowly. "That affects everyone," he said. "Yes," I replied, "including me." My sister was less careful. She asked outright, "Are you rewriting everything?" she said. I smiled gently. "No," I replied. "I'm writing it properly for the first time." She didn't like that answer. They started to notice patterns. Who I called first. Who I trusted with details. Who I kept at a distance. And distance, when new, feels like rejection. My daughter came to me one evening. "They're worried," she said softly. I nodded. "They should be," I replied. She looked surprised. "Why?" she asked. "Because worry means you know something matters," I said. A family meeting was suggested. Not demanded. Suggested. That alone showed how much had changed. I agreed. They gathered around the table again. Same faces. Different energy. My nephew spoke first. "We just want to understand where we stand." I folded my hands. "You stand where you've always stood," I replied. "Your position just isn't elevated by mine anymore." The room went still. My sister frowned. "That sounds harsh." I shook my head. "It sounds honest," I replied. My son cleared his throat. "Are you saying you don't trust us?" I met his eyes. "I'm saying trust grows from respect," I replied. And respect wasn't always present. Silence followed. They weren't angry. They were unsettled. Because the rules they lived by had changed. Quietly. Permanently. That night, my son sent a message. "I don't want to lose my place in your life." I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied, "Then don't try to own it." The truth was simple. Legacy isn't about equal shares. It's about equal responsibility. And not everyone was ready for that. As the house settled into quiet again, I felt no guilt, no second guessing, just resolve, because the woman I had become would never again be edited for comfort. The truth always comes out when people realize they can't control the ending. It came from my son. Not loudly, not angrily, but honestly. He asked to see me alone. No sister, no daughter, no witnesses, just us. That mattered. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. The same table where I once packed his lunch, where I once listened more than I spoke. He looked older somehow. Not in age, in understanding. "I'm scared," he said quietly. I nodded. "I know," I replied. He frowned. "You don't even ask why." I smiled gently. "Because fear looks the same every time," I said. "It shows up when control leaves." He leaned forward. "I thought if I stayed close, I wouldn't lose you," he admitted. I met his eyes. "You stayed close," I replied. "But you didn't stay respectful." His shoulders dropped. "I didn't mean to look down on you," he said. I nodded slowly. "But you did," I replied. That truth sat between us. Uncomfortable. Necessary. "I thought I knew better," he whispered. I reached across the table and touched his hand. "Knowing better doesn't mean deciding for someone," I said. "It means standing beside them." Tears filled his eyes. He didn't wipe them away. "I see it now," he said. "You weren't weak. You were patient." I smiled sadly. "And patience ran out," I replied. That was the moment. The real one. Not the meetings. Not the papers. Not the arguments. This. He nodded. "I don't want to fight you anymore," he said. I squeezed his hand once. "Then don't," I replied. Later that night, my sister called. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "I think I understand now," she said. I listened. "You were never small," she continued. "We just needed you to be." I closed my eyes. "Yes," I replied. Understanding didn't fix everything, but it changed the ground we stood on. That evening, I sat by the window again. The same place. But it no longer felt like waiting. It felt like choosing. I knew then. The legacy I was shaping wasn't money. It wasn't control. It was permission. Permission for the women after me to stand sooner. Speak louder. Shrink less. And with that understanding came peace. Not the quiet kind. The steady kind. Because the family that once looked down on me now stood on their own feet. And I no longer carried their weight. Peace doesn't rush in. It arrives slowly, like a careful guest, checking if it's truly welcome. That was how the days felt after the truth finally settled between us. No tension. No loud apologies. No dramatic gestures. Just space. The house felt different. Not empty. Free. I moved through it without feeling watched, without feeling measured, without wondering if my choices would be questioned. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing myself. My family adjusted quietly. They didn't announce it. They didn't explain it. They simply stopped interfering. My son called less often. But when he did, he listened more. He asked instead of assumed. "How are you feeling today? What do you want to do about this?" Small questions. Big changes. My sister stopped giving advice unless I asked. That alone felt like a miracle. One afternoon she said, "I trust your judgment." I looked at her. She meant it. My daughter grew closer. Not as a protector. As a companion. We laughed more. Spoke honestly. And when I disagreed with her, she didn't flinch. She smiled. One morning, I realized something important. No one was managing me anymore. And I wasn't managing anyone either. I began to enjoy simple things again. Long walks, quiet mornings, music playing softly while I cooked. Not because life had become easy, but because it had become mine. At a small gathering, someone asked me, "How did you get them to respect you?" I smiled. "I stopped asking," I replied. They nodded slowly, like that answer settled something inside them too. Later that night, I sat with my notebook one last time. I read back through the pages. The pain, the clarity, the resolve. And I realized I didn't need to write anymore. The story had moved into living. Still, something remained. One final decision. Not about money. Not about power. About meaning. Because looking up to someone doesn't last forever. But what you leave behind does. And I knew the choice I was about to make would surprise them. I didn't announce the decision. That was important. For most of my life, I had explained myself before acting. I had softened my choices so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. This time, I did neither. I just decided. It happened on a quiet morning. The kind of morning that feels honest. No visitors. No phone calls. No pressure. I sat at the table with a cup of tea, and the papers laid out neatly in front of me. I read them slowly. Not because I was unsure, but because I was deliberate. I thought about each person. Not with anger. With clarity. Who had stood beside me when I spoke. Who had tried to silence me when I stood up. Who had listened. Who had waited for me to sit back down. Legacy isn't about love alone. It's about responsibility. When I finished, I signed. No shaking. No pause. Just a steady hand and a calm breath. I felt lighter the moment the pen left the page. I didn't call anyone afterward. I went for a walk instead. The sun was warm. The air felt clean. I noticed things I had ignored for years: flowers pushing through cracks, children laughing down the street, an old man waving at no one in particular. Life going on. My daughter noticed the change first. "You seem peaceful," she said later that day. "I am," I replied. She hesitated. "Did you do something?" she asked. I smiled. "Yes," I said. "I finished something." She didn't push. That told me she was growing too. My sister sensed it next. "You've made up your mind about something," she said on the phone. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Yes," I replied. She exhaled slowly. "I trust you," she said. That meant more than she realized. My son felt it last. Distance sharpens awareness. He came by a few days later, quieter than usual. "You're different again," he said. I smiled gently. "I'm complete," I replied. He frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" he asked. I met his eyes. "It means I'm no longer waiting for approval," I said. He nodded slowly. "I think I understand," he said. I believed him. That evening, alone again, I sat by the window one final time. The same place where I once waited. Only now, I wasn't waiting for anything. I wasn't hoping they would look up. I already knew my worth. The decision I made wasn't meant to punish. It was meant to protect. Not just me, but the truth. And when the time came for them to learn what I had chosen, they would understand. Some with relief, some with regret, but all of them would finally see me clearly. The truth has a way of moving on its own. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to explain it. Once it's set in motion, it finds its way to the right people. The first reaction came without words. My son noticed changes. Not sudden ones, subtle ones. Calls returned later than usual. Meetings scheduled without his name included. Decisions that no longer paused for his opinion. He didn't say anything at first, but I saw it in his eyes. Realization. One evening, he finally asked, "Did you change something?" I didn't answer right away. I finished pouring tea. Then I sat down. "Yes," I replied. He nodded slowly. "Is that why people are acting different?" he asked. I met his gaze. "They're acting honest," I said. He swallowed. "You didn't tell me," he said. I smiled gently. "I didn't need to," I replied. My sister learned next. Not through me. Through silence. She called one afternoon, unsettled. "They didn't call me back," she said. "Not like before." I listened. "That's new," she added. I nodded. "Yes," I replied. "It is." She paused. "You made a decision," she said. "Yes," I replied again. She hesitated. "Does it affect me?" she asked. I chose my words carefully. "It affects behavior," I replied, "not love." She went quiet, then said softly, "I understand." And I believed her. My daughter felt it differently. She felt relief. "I don't feel like I have to protect you anymore," she said one night. I smiled. "You never had to," I replied. She laughed softly. "I know that now," she said. The changes didn't come with drama. They came with alignment. People responded differently because the structure beneath them had shifted. Not visibly, but permanently. One afternoon, my son came by unannounced. He didn't sit right away. He stood near the window. "You trusted yourself more than us," he said. I nodded. "Yes," I replied. He turned to me. "That hurts," he admitted. I met his eyes. "It healed me," I replied. He sat down slowly. "You don't regret it?" he asked. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I regret waiting." That truth stayed with him. I could see it. That night, I wrote one last line in my notebook. They didn't look up because I rose. They looked up because I stopped bending. I closed the notebook and placed it in the drawer. Some stories don't need to be reread. They need to be lived forward. And as the house settled into quiet once more, I knew. It was about peace. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The day everything settled did not feel special. There was no announcement, no gathering, no moment where everyone stood around watching me. And that was the point. Real endings don't perform. They rest. I woke up early that morning, as I always did. The house was quiet. Not the lonely kind. The peaceful kind. I made my tea and sat by the window, watching the sky change color. I thought about how many mornings I had sat in that same spot, waiting for something to change. Waiting for respect. Waiting for understanding. Waiting for permission. I smiled gently. I was no longer waiting. My family adjusted in small, honest ways. My sister called before visiting. My daughter asked instead of assumed. My son spoke carefully, like someone learning a new language. The language of respect. One afternoon, my son came by quietly. He didn't bring arguments. He didn't bring fear. He brought honesty. "I used to think looking down meant being in control," he said. "Now I see it just meant I was afraid." I nodded. "Fear makes people small," I replied, "not age." He smiled sadly. "I'm still learning," he said. "So am I replied. That evening, my daughter hugged me tightly. "You seem lighter," she said. "I am," I replied. "I put something down." "What?" she asked. "Trying to prove my worth," I said. She nodded, tears in her eyes. At the next family gathering, no one rushed me. No one interrupted. No one spoke for me. When I shared my thoughts, they listened. Not politely, respectfully. My sister leaned over and whispered, "They really look up to you now." I smiled gently. "They always could have," I replied. "They just didn't know how." Later that night, alone again, I reflected on the title of my story. My family looked down on me, now they looked up to me. It wasn't because I became louder. It wasn't because I gained power. It was because I stopped shrinking. I learned something late in life. But not too late. People will look down on you as long as you accept the view. The moment you stand firm, they have no choice but to lift their eyes. I turned off the light and lay down peacefully. No fear. No regret. Just certainty. Because I didn't change who I was. I remembered who I had always been. And once a woman remembers her worth, no one ever looks down on her again. If this story touched you, please subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell for more emotional stories like this. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Somewhere out there, I might be reading.